now that we've got our 3 green screen elements properly keyed and sort of placed on the horizon, I might play with that a little bit. It's time to get into keyframing, and this gets really complicated really fast, especially when you've got 1, 2, 3 different layers on top of a background. So one thing that helps is these eyeballs on the track. You can basically blank out different elements and isolate one. And so what I see here is that this helps me find out that this is the element, this is that element. For this one, I think I'm going to keep the background. I'm just going to work with one at a time. I'm going to start with this one. And I think this one was the one that I wanted to be the foreground element. So that is the one on the bottom, right here, this clip, the one that I see. And to get into the animation features, I need to get to effects controls for that clip. Now, pretty much everything that you see here, when you see one of these clocks, it says toggle animation, what it means is that you can take that property and you can animate it and move it and make it change properties through the timeline. So that clip, this timeline is the main timeline, but this is the timeline just for that clip. So if you remember from the last one, I was playing around with a position and I was playing around with scale, and I was able to move that object anywhere onto the background that I want it to be. Well, those properties are both properties that can be animated, and I can change them, which means it will allow me to control where it is in time. So instead of staying there and just moving in place as it is right now, I want it to climb. I want that little hand puppet to climb up the dune. And in order to do that, you have to be paying close attention to where you are, where your keyframes are, and I'll show you that in just a sec. So if you toggle animation, and this is a position animation, so I'm going to toggle the animation for position, you'll immediately see this, which allows you to add or remove keyframes. You can move 2 different keyframes, and you'll see a keyframe right here. And that's the first keyframe, basically locking that 863, 988, this position right here happens at the first frame of this clip. If I move it forward, that position stays the same because I haven't added any additional frames. But since what I want to have happen is I want to have this hand puppet move up the dune, at the end of the clip, I want the position to be something different. I want the position to be up at the top, maybe even partly obscured on its way out of the frame. And then you'll notice that when I move that position at that point in the timeline, another keyframe is automatically added. What happens is Adobe knows that that's where you want it to end at, and it creates a pathway for that to work. So if I hit play right now, should be able to do that slow crawl up. Doesn't quite fit the footsteps, but you get the general idea of what's working there. If I choose the object, and now I'm a little bit lost with this one. If I choose the object, okay, I wanted to be able to show you a pathway, and I know that there's a way to do that. I think I switched clips here. There. So now I have the position, I have the right clip, I was fumbling around there, and this right here is representing the pathway, and this is representing the center point of where that object is on the pathway. So if I go back and forth, you can see that circle just goes up the path that I set it. It's basically 2 points on a line, 2 different positions at 2 different times in the miniature timeline. And that pathway is also something that you can bend and manipulate. And so I'm going to bend it in a couple of different places just so that you can see how that can be manipulated a little bit more naturally and intuitively. Notice it created a little bend, created another keyframe, and now it's going to follow that path instead of the straight line path, giving it a little bit more organic look as it's climbing up the dune. Anyway, that's set. So now that particular clip has that motion, and I would want to do the same thing with another clip. And so when I switch to the other clip, I've got a blank timeline, I've got that clip's position properties, And again, any one of these things can change. So you can have it rotate or scale or position or disappear or change the keying properties, or any other property that you have can basically fluctuate once you know how to work with keyframes. Using keyframes is kind of the key for animation. Once you understand that, you're able to open up a lot more that Adobe can do and start getting into other effects and animation software like After Effects and Animator, because keyframes help you take a static object and move it across the screen and control the properties for its movement. I'll go back to that one clip that I was working on. If you ever get into trouble and you say, well, either, and again, a couple things I pointed out, you can move these keyframes, you can delete individual keyframes, you can jump to keyframe to see what those properties are at each one. And if you get into trouble, you're always welcome to hit this. It'll say warning, delete the keyframes, and hit OK. And then that gives you a chance to start over. And then again, start the keyframe, toggle the animation. And again, be careful about where you are in the timeline, what you're doing on position. There's another way. Oops. There's another way that you can create that line. You don't have to use the numbers, you can just move it. And again, it might even be easier too, at least when you're starting, to just do one at a time, so you don't accidentally do what I just did, which is to get a little bit confused about where those things are. Anyway, I hope this helps you. You want to spend some time trying to figure out what your keyframes are. Don't get too frustrated. You can always delete the keyframes. You can always move things out of the way. You can always blind tracks so that it's not confusing when you're working with multiple layers. But ideally, their goal would be to have all of these objects moving independently of each other. And that's what I would like you to practice so you can get some experience with keyframes. Thank you for watching, and I hope this has been enjoyable and gives you a sense of what's possible with the software.